It looks like the G7 finance ministers are moving closer towards a kind of general consensus, but really they're not that close to actually a fully fledged deal with all the I's dotted and all the T's crossed. Just heading into this meeting, for example, we had the German finance minister, Christian Lindner, saying that there are many legal and technical issues that still need to be resolved. A US official who works for Janet Yellen, the US Treasury Secretary, saying that there is progress, they hope, towards the sort of main principle, the overall principle, but not so much the fine detail. Just to kind of sketch out for you the two sides of this argument that's been going on for many months now. You have on the one side really the US and the Canadians who at the start of all of this were simply really pushing for there to be a complete confiscation of these frozen assets and for them to be handed over to the Ukrainians. And then on the other side of the debate you have mostly the Europeans who are much more cautious about this in terms of the potential legal precedents that you could set, you know, in terms of confiscating the assets of a sovereign country. What we look like, or what it looks like we are approaching some sort of middle ground here, is for there to be this loan potentially brokered by the World Bank, although that's a little bit tricky in terms of whether it's going to be for military purposes or not. A loan up to $50 billion, which is the figure that's been talked about by the US. That loan backed up by the profits of these $300 billion of frozen Russian assets. And then we could see some sort of a concrete announcement when the G7 leaders come to Italy in about 3 weeks' time.
The G7 also saying it wants a united front over what it calls China's industrial policies. What might that look like?
Yeah, going into this meeting, we had the US announcing that their new higher tariffs on Chinese imports are going to be kicking in on the 1st of August. Those tariffs targeting lots of things, but in particular electric vehicles, the batteries that go into those electric vehicles, as well as a wide range of medical goods. Now, we do not expect the Europeans or indeed the other members of the G7 to follow suit in terms of placing those sorts of tariffs on Chinese imports into their countries. In particular for the Europeans, this is a very sensitive subject because they do a lot of trade with China in terms of, for example, Germany's car industry. Just hearing from Christian Lindner again, the German finance minister, he said that trade wars are all about losing, that you can't win them. So we do expect some tough language about the impact of Chinese imports into these countries, but not any sort of a deal around, you know, sort of coordinated tariffs. Just finally, there is also this proposal from France and Brazil as part of the wider G20 group for there to be a global tax on billionaires. Now, we understand that that does not have the support of the United States, clearly a very important voice in that group, and there is also concern about the fact that this minimum tax threshold that was agreed a couple of years ago for multinational companies, that has not yet been fully implemented. So there are voices in the room who are basically saying we don't want to move on to another sort of global tax when we haven't fully implemented the first agreement.
All right, thank you so much, Giles Gibson, coming to us live from the G7 summit in Rome.